Hi guys, DeMarco here, and welcome to this week's edition of the Rear View Mirror Show. I've always believed that in order to be a successful gambler, you have to not only look forward to the games, but you have to look back to the games that just transpired. Because for me, the research starts there. Yeah, you've got to put a lot of time into doing this, but that's how you make money. So, it's Monday morning, 6 a.m., and I've already started handicapping next Sunday's NFL card. And for me, it all starts with a three-step process. Number one, I review all the box scores for Sunday's game. Number two, I read all the Associated Press game stories. Number three, and this is the most important one, as I've told you many times, the beat writers. They are my eyes and ears. These are the guys that have been with the teams all week long. These are the guys that are at the stadiums all day yesterday. These are the guys that are around the players, the coaches all week long. They're in the locker rooms after the game. Their reports, all their sidebars, all their follow-up stories, all their little podcasts and their video casts, those are the guys that know more about the teams than anybody else. And those nuggets and those tidbits and their insights, well, they influence me more than anything else. So as I handicap the games and then look at the statistical analysis as the week progresses, those things that I gain from reflecting on what happened yesterday will influence my decisions as the week goes on. So this rear view show, that's what you're going to get. A quick little tour in the next couple of minutes about what happened yesterday. And let's start with the game that was my best bet yesterday, and that was the Buffalo Bills blowout at home of the San Francisco 49ers. How about the Bills? Rex Ryan, 0-2 start on the hot seat. No more. They love Rexy now. 4 straight wins since he fired his offensive coordinator, Greg Roman, as well. Gee, what are the Bills doing? They're running the ball, and they're doing it well. And listen, going into this game yesterday, I thought they would have tremendous success running the ball because the San Francisco 49ers are absolutely dreadful when it comes to stopping anybody on the ground. That is the reason that I went against them 2 weeks ago when they were in the Thursday night game at home against Arizona. It's the reason I went with them yesterday. A little extra added motivation, I thought, as well. Shady McCoy, LaShawn McCoy, would have a chip on his shoulder going against his former Eagles coach, Chip Kelly, who in the first 2 years in Philadelphia rode Sean McCoy like crazy, and then he shuffled him off to Buffalo, opting instead to go with DeMarco Murray and Ryan Matthews. Well, McCoy got his revenge yesterday. 19 carries, 140 yards, 3 touchdowns. McCoy, the last 4 games, again, all Buffalo wins, 73 carries, 470 yards. The Bills yesterday, 312 yards on the ground. How bad is this San Francisco run defense? Well, not only have the 49ers lost 5 straight games since that season-opening 28-0 shutout win at home against the LA Rams, but in their last 5 games, all those losses, they have allowed 981 yards on the ground. And guys, this number is only going to get worse because remember, they lost their all-pro linebacker, Bowman, a couple of weeks ago to a season-ending knee injury. But remember what I pointed out in my analysis each of the past 2 weeks in going against the 49ers. Chip Kelly's offense is the biggest hindrance to his defense. It doesn't matter how talented the defense is or how not injured it is. The problem is the offense plays at such a fast pace. The defense is always going to see extended playing time. The defense gets worn out. And when it's injury-riddled and it's not that talented, it's going to be exposed. And that's what you're seeing already through the first 6 games here of this season. San Francisco, just a bad defense. By the way, the Buffalo Bills also exposed Colin Kaepernick for what he is, just an average quarterback. Yesterday, 13 for 29, 187 yards, constantly was overthrowing receivers. But the Bills now on a little 8-3 ATS roll at home. Next game, I was definitely wrong with my free pick yesterday. I only lost one of the three free picks. Can't even say that at 6 a.m. this morning. That loser was with Philadelphia. Boy, the Redskins. There's another guy who was on the hot seat, Jay Gruden, the Redskins head coach, after losing the first 2 games at home to the Steelers and the Dallas Cowboys. The Redskins have now reeled off 4 straight wins. Yesterday, 27-20 over the Eagles. Carson Wentz looking like a rookie yesterday because he had no pass protection. 11 for 22, 179 yards, 5 sacks. At the end of the Countdown to Kickoff show, when I analyzed this game with Steve Budin last Tuesday, I pointed out that at the time of the recording, I did not know whether or not the NFL was going to uphold the 10-game suspension for the Eagles starting right tackle, who was their best offensive lineman, Lane Johnson, because of a PED violation. A few hours after the show was recorded, they did, in fact, uphold the 10-game suspension. Johnson sat out. They started a rookie who was abused by the Redskins, Wentz under pressure all day, sacked 5 times. The Eagles unable to run the ball, 4 for 12 on third downs, only 239 yards of total offense in the game. But that isn't necessarily why they lost. No, they lost in that game because the Eagles defense for a second straight week simply failed to show up. This defense that statistically was among the top 3 in the league coming into this game allowed the Redskins to get 26 first downs, 493 total yards, and a Redskins team that had been unable to run the ball on anybody all season yesterday averaged 7 yards a carry, 230 yards on the ground. And they did all this damage offensively, even though their best player, tight end Jordan Reed, wasn't even in the game. The Eagles also shot themselves in the foot. A week after having 14 penalties in their loss at Detroit, they had 13 penalties yesterday. So 27 penalties in the past 2 games for the Eagles for 225 yards. Last night, interesting game with the Titans. Aren't you glad you bought the half point and heeded my advice on that one? They win it, Texans win it last night in overtime, a game that also manages just to go over the posted price because the game does go into overtime as well. Lamar Miller, the guy who I felt was the most important of the free agent acquisitions and the offseason acquisitions by the Texans here. A week after having just 8 carries for 20 yards in the loss at Minnesota, last night 24 carries for a season-high 149 yards. Texans now 4-0 against the spread at home. Of course, they're 0-2 on the road, losing at New England, losing at Minnesota, getting outscored in those games 58-13. Why do I bring that up? Because next week they play at Denver. You know that one is not going to go well, especially with the Broncos coming off a loss and Brock Osweiler going back to Denver. The Colts, by the way, in their 2 previous road games, they gave up 30 to the Jacksonville Jaguars playing in London. They gave up 34 in the loss to Denver. Last night, they blow a 2-touchdown lead, and they lose in overtime and give up 26 points. Needless to say, Indianapolis can't play on the road. Next game, how about the Tennessee Titans? They win it 28-26 over Cleveland, but for you Tennessee backers yesterday, it'll make you sick knowing that the Titans actually enjoyed a 28-13 lead with 6 minutes and 43 seconds left to go in that game. Cody Kessler, he's actually developing into a pretty decent quarterback here for a guy who started as a 3rd stringer here for the Browns early in the season. 336 yards, 2 touchdowns. Not a bad performance considering he was sacked 6 times in that game. Surprisingly, the Browns managed to put up 26 points and get the backdoor cover in that game, even though they were only 3 for 14 on third downs in that game. Browns defense, though, again, one of the worst, if not the worst in the league. 407 yards allowed. Giants, 27-23, home win against Baltimore yesterday. They were laying 3.5 points in that game. Some places had them at 4. Again, that was another typical case where you were wise to buy down the half point to ensure yourself the win if you were on Big Blue. They snapped a 3-game losing streak yesterday. Ravens, meanwhile, lose their 3rd straight after opening the season 3-0. Eli Manning yesterday, 32 for 46, 403 yards, 3 touchdowns. Odell Beckham Jr., he sounded love yesterday. Maybe football was fun for him yesterday. I don't know. Maybe he needs Dr. Joyce Brothers. 8 catches, 222 yards, 2 touchdowns. The guy needs a shrink. But listen, the Giants need a ground game. Giants have no ground game. Yesterday, 17 carries for 38 yards. Ravens yesterday, one of the reasons they didn't win, 5 for 18. On third down conversions. They also had 15 penalties for 111 yards. Surprisingly, the Giants did manage to win that game, despite the fact that they couldn't run the ball, despite the fact that they were 4 for 15 on third down opportunities, despite the fact that they had 7 penalties for 119 yards in that game, despite the fact that they did not have anything going in terms of time of possession. Again, If you can't run the ball, that means your offense is not going to be on the field that often. The Ravens had a 10-minute lead in terms of time of possession. And you know Baltimore was up 23-20. They had taken a brief lead with 2 minutes and 4 seconds to go in that game. The Giants now head off to London, where they play the early game at 9:30 in the morning, an Eastern Time kickoff in London on Sunday against the Rams. Meanwhile, the Ravens, for a second straight weekend, return to MetLife Stadium in northern New Jersey to take on the Jets on Sunday. The Saints won 41-38 at home yesterday against Carolina. They needed a 52-yard field goal with 11 seconds to go to win that game. Drew Brees, of course, was Drew Brees as usual yesterday. 34 for 49 for 446 yards, 4 touchdowns in the game. Saints yesterday, very efficient on third down, 8 for 16, their conversion percentage, 523 total yards in that game. They won the game despite, and this seems to be a trend here I'm talking about, 10 penalties, 126 yards. Here's the most interesting thing. They had three pass interference calls yesterday, called on New Orleans Saints. All of them right around the goal line, all resulting in touchdowns for Carolina. Carolina 3 for 11 on third down conversion tries, 4th straight loss for the Panthers, who entered their bye week, already eliminated at 1-5 from postseason consideration. Panthers made a game of it, though. They were down 21-0, but it was too little too late. Too little too late, not the case, however, for the Jacksonville Jaguars. As they rallied for a 17-16 win at Chicago, scoring all 17 points for them yesterday in the fourth quarter. Brian Hoyer, though, another strong game. 4th straight 300-yard-plus outing for Hoyer since replacing Jay Cutler. 30 for 49, 302 yards in that game. Jaguars win that game despite the fact they were only 2 for 10 on third downs. Bears enjoyed a 12-minute time of possession advantage in that game, but they did not take advantage of all their red zone opportunities. They settled for field goals when they needed touchdowns. It came back to bite them in the ass, and they lose that game 17-16. Detroit won 31-28 at home. This is another game, just like the Houston game last night, that if you were on either side in this game, you had to buy that half point, and you would have walked away with the win. If you didn't, and you walked away with a push, or you settled for a push, shame on you. The defense held Todd Gurley to 58 yards on 14 carries. Gurley had 15 yards on his first carry in the game. Didn't have anything the rest of that game. Matthew Stafford, very efficient game, 4 touchdown passes, 270 yards. Hey, Miami, 30-15 over Pittsburgh. Who would have guessed that? Was that the upset of the day yesterday? Dolphins, 474 yards total offense, 222 yards on the ground, 6.2 yards per carry on the ground for a team that hasn't done anything on the ground all season long. 36-24 time advantage in terms of time of possession. And Ben Roethlisberger suffers a knee injury that needs surgery. Nothing went right for the Steelers yesterday. How about the Steelers? They win 2 straight home blowouts against the Jets in Kansas City after suffering their worst franchise loss in like 27 years on the road to Philadelphia. And then they lay another egg on the road in their next road game against Miami. By the way, New England won, as you know, at home against Cincinnati. Tom Brady, 2 games back, 57 for 75, 782 yards, 6 touchdown passes. Gronkowski, 2 games back with Tom Brady, 12 catches, 271 yards. The offense, 2 games with Brady at the helm, 68 points. I guess that vacation with Giselle really didn't bother him much. What can I tell you? Kansas City yesterday, 26-10 at Oakland. The Raiders entered that game with the league's worst pass defense, allowing opposing quarterbacks to complete 64.9% of their passes. So what did Alex Smith do yesterday? 19 for 22, 224 yards. Yeah, that was pretty efficient. Spencer Ware yesterday, a career-high 131 yards rushing on 24 carries. In all, Kansas City 406 total yards against the defenseless Raiders. 183 of them came on the ground. Not a bad rebound performance for Andy Reid's Chiefs. Remember, they lost by 29 points at Pittsburgh prior week. They were coming off a bye. They snapped Oakland's 3-game winning streak. Raiders now 2-9 against the spread. Their last 11 at home. Statistical anomaly or just a good old-fashioned trend. Kansas City now 11-3, their last 14 at Oakland, and the road team has covered 16 of the last 21 in that series. Seattle. I talked about the Seahawks in the Countdown to Kickoff show last week. 26-24 home win at Atlanta. They were up 17-13 at halftime. Matt Ryan goes crazy in the third quarter when the Falcons score 21 unanswered points. They're up 24-17 in the fourth quarter. Naturally, the Seahawks score 9 unanswered points in the fourth quarter to squeak out the win. They don't cover. And the point that I made in the Countdown to Kickoff show is Seattle has not been a profitable team in Vegas for a couple of years. 10-12-1 against the spread in their last 23 games overall. 5-6-1 against the spread in their last 11 games as a home chalk. Meanwhile, the Falcons 5-0 as a dog this year, 9-1 against the spread in their last 10 as a puppy. The Dallas Cowboys, did they show up again last night at Lambeau? 30-16. Zeke Elliott, 28 carries, 157 yards for the NFL's leading rusher. Last 4 games, 140, 138, 134, 157 yards. What made his yardage really impressive yesterday is the Packers entered that game with the #1 ground defense in the NFL, giving up just 42.8 yards per game. Dak Prescott, 3 touchdown passes, 247 yards. 424 yards total offense for the Cowboys. One little bit of concern about their offense, only 3 for 11 on third downs. Back up just a little bit, go to the Thursday night game, the Chargers, the 21-13 upset of Denver. Once again, Broncos, end of last year, you saw when Peyton Manning couldn't throw the ball and Brock Osweiler, they didn't want him to throw the ball that much. They became a ground-oriented team with C.J. Anderson. C.J. Anderson, great start first 2 games this season. Since then, he's been missing in action, only had 10 carries, 37 yards in San Diego in that loss. The ground game has been unproductive for 4 straight weeks. You are not going to win many games with Trevor Siemian throwing the ball 50 times. The fact that he completed 30 passes for 230 yards, that is inconsequential. You are not going to win the game that many times with Trevor Siemian throwing the ball 50 times. Broncos only 304 yards of total offense in that game. Only 84 of those yards came on the ground. They had 12 penalties for 103 yards. Meanwhile, the Chargers were damn lucky to win that game, considering they were only 3 for 13 on third down opportunities. Overall, the favorites, 4-8-2 going into the Monday night game. Outright dogs, Chargers, Saints, Jaguars, Redskins, Dolphins, and Cowboys all winning those games outright. Home teams going into the Monday night game, 7-5-2 against the spread. Straight up winners, that little statistical anomaly I always like to tell you about, 10-2-2 against the spread. The only favorites to cover Thursday through Sunday, just 4 of them, Bills, Kansas City, New England, and the Giants. As far as I'm concerned, thank God the Bills were one of them, since that was my best bet. That'll do it for this week's edition of the show. I wish you well, guys. I'll talk to you again next week.